We were told happiness is the point, that the goal of life is to be fulfilled, to be joyful, to live our best lives. We put it on posters, we sell it in advertisements, we link it to success, money, love, purpose. And if you're not happy, they say, something is wrong with your mindset, with your habits, with you. But what if the lie isn't that we're unhappy? What if the lie is that we were ever meant to be happy in the way we were promised? Arthur Schopenhauer was one of the few thinkers brave enough to say it out loud. Maybe life isn't built for happiness. Maybe the chase itself is the source of our suffering. And maybe, just maybe, everything we were told to pursue is a beautiful illusion designed to keep us running in circles. He lived in a world already beginning to dream of progress, of enlightenment, of future utopias. But he looked around and saw pain, relentless, honest, ordinary pain. Desire, disappointment, sickness, aging, emptiness, and beneath it all, a restless hunger that never truly ends. This wasn't just pessimism, it was recognition. Schopenhauer wasn't trying to depress you, he was trying to wake you up. Because what if happiness, the way we define it, is not a birthright, but a mirage? The modern world sells happiness as a product. Do more, buy more, improve yourself, manifest, optimize. Happiness is the prize at the end of performance. But in reality, most people are exhausted, quietly aching behind smiles, scrolling, consuming, chasing, performing, and never arriving. Schopenhauer dared to say, that's because the premise is broken, the promise is false. He didn't blame individuals for their unhappiness, he blamed the structure of desire itself. He saw that the human condition wasn't flawed, it was honest. And happiness wasn't our natural state, it was the pausen. Exception, a brief pause, a moment of silence between the noise, a still point in the storm of wanting. And if we accept that not with despair, but with clarity, then something opens. A new kind of honesty, a deeper kind of life. One not built on the endless chase for pleasure, but on the courage to face what is. Because maybe happiness was never meant to be chased. Maybe it was meant to be seen for what it is, brief, beautiful, and ultimately not the point. There's a truth you feel long before you're ready to admit it. That under the surface of joy, of goals, of success, there's pain. Not always loud, not always tragic, but constant. It shows up as restlessness, as longing, as the strange ache you feel, even on your best days. Schopenhauer didn't run from this truth. He made it the center of his philosophy. To him, suffering wasn't the flaw in the design, it was the design. Life, he said, is not a gift, it is a condition, and to be alive is to want endlessly, restlessly, painfully. We are creatures of hunger. And this hunger is not just for food or shelter or warmth. It's deeper, it's existential. We want love, we want recognition, we want meaning, we want to matter. But the moment one desire is satisfied, another takes its place, and then another, and another. This cycle of want, satisfaction, boredom, and want again is the engine of suffering. You think, if I just get this one thing, I'll be okay. But the moment you get it, your mind shifts, you adapt, you want something new. This is what Schopenhauer called the will, a blind, irrational force that drives all of life. It doesn't care about peace. It only wants to persist. And so, you're never still. Even in success, there is fear. Even in love, there is loss. Even in pleasure, there is the anxiety that it will end. He saw that pain wasn't the interruption of life, it was life. And yet, he didn't sink into despair. He offered something rare in philosophy, a brutal honesty paired with strange compassion. Because once you accept suffering, you stop blaming yourself for feeling it. You stop chasing a version of life that doesn't exist. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and instead ask, "What's real?" And in that honesty, a strange kind of freedom begins to form. Not the freedom to escape pain, but the freedom to stop pretending it shouldn't be there. Most of us live in quiet denial. We chase pleasure, distraction, productivity, anything to keep from facing the truth. That pain is not a punishment. It's part of being alive. And that wholeness doesn't mean removing suffering. It means living with it, without illusion. Schopenhauer saw life as a wound that never fully heals, but also as a place where beauty, art, and compassion arise precisely because of that wound. And if that's true, then the goal isn't to be happy, it's to be honest. And from that honesty, something real can grow. Behind every thought, every plan, every heartbeat, there is something moving. Not a conscious voice, not a clear intention, but a drive, a pull, a force. Schopenhauer called it the will. Not willpower, not decision, but something deeper, older, blind, and tireless. The will is not rational. It doesn't have a goal. It doesn't want what's best for you. It just wants. It is the invisible engine behind all life. The reason animals struggle, plants climb toward light, humans chase meaning. The will is not personal, it is cosmic, and it lives through you. That's the terrifying part, because it means that even your most noble desires for truth, for love, for happiness might just be strategies of the will, more ways to continue desiring. And the will never rests. You think, if I get this job, if I fall in love, if I heal. But the moment one fire dies down, another lights up. A new goal, a new need, a new itch under the surface of your life. You are not steering this force, you are being pulled by it. Even in rest, it whispers, you should be doing more. You're falling behind. You're not enough. And so the chase continues. But no matter how fast you run, you never arrive. Because the will doesn't want you to arrive. Arrival is death to the will. Stillness is its enemy. Schopenhauer wasn't trying to strip you of hope. He was trying to set you free from illusion. Because once you see the will, once you understand that you are not your desires, but the space beneath them, then something else becomes possible. Not the end of desire, but a shift in your relationship to it. A soft disidentification, a loosening of the grip. You still feel hunger, but you stop believing that fulfillment is permanent. You still want, but you stop assuming that getting what you want will save you. And in that shift, there is silence. Not the silence of boredom, but the silence of peace. Because you are no longer a puppet pulled by invisible strings. You see the strings, you feel them, but you do not obey them. And sometimes that's enough, not to be happy, but to be free, even for a moment. Happiness is the prize we are all taught to chase. From the moment we can walk, we are conditioned to want it, to believe in it, to strive for it. But what if happiness, as we've been taught to understand it, is the trap itself? What if it's not the goal, but the bait? Schopenhauer saw what most people spend their whole lives trying to ignore. Happiness is not a destination, it's a flicker, a moment, a temporary absence of pain. It's the sigh after suffering ends, the silence between two waves of wanting. And yet, we build our lives around it. We tell ourselves, once I get this, I'll be happy. Once I fix that, I'll be okay. But every time we arrive, the ground shifts, the feeling fades, the mind moves the goalpost. Why? Because happiness, in Schopenhauer's view, is not a positive condition, it's a negative one. Not the presence of joy, but the brief absence of pain. We don't feel happiness because we've achieved something permanent. We feel it because, for a moment, the will rests, the fire of desire quiets, but only for a moment. And then it returns, with new hunger, new longing, new dissatisfaction. This is the cycle. You suffer from lack, you seek, you attain, you feel relief, then boredom creeps in, the will awakens, and you begin again. To Schopenhauer, this isn't failure. This is the structure of existence. That's why he warned. To chase happiness as if it were a lasting state is to enter into permanent frustration, because happiness, true, lasting happiness, is incompatible with the nature of desire. And yet, we glorify it. We wear it like a badge. We compare it. We post it. We perform it, not because we feel it, but because we believe we're supposed to. Schopenhauer stripped away that illusion. He said, "Stop chasing light in a system designed for movement. You won't find rest by running faster. You won't find happiness by fulfilling every desire, only by seeing through the illusion that fulfillment is salvation." And this is where most turn away, because the truth is uncomfortable. We don't want to hear that the thing we've built our lives around is a mirage. We want to believe happiness is out there, waiting, achievable, earnable. But Schopenhauer whispered a quieter truth. Maybe happiness isn't what we need most. Maybe what we truly seek is not excitement, but peace. Not pleasure, but stillness. Not a high, but an end to the inner war. And that begins not with more chasing, but with letting go. Imagine this. You don't want anything, not because you've given up, but because you're at peace. There is no craving gnawing at the edge of your mind, no silent itch beneath your skin, no if only whispering in your ear. There is just quiet. This is what Schopenhauer pointed to, not happiness in the modern sense, but freedom from desire itself. Not a life full of pleasure, but a life emptied of inner turmoil. He saw that the chase, not the failure, is the real source of suffering, and that the moments of deepest peace don't come when we get what we want, but when, for a moment, we stop wanting. We mistake excitement for meaning, but Schopenhauer saw that excitement is always temporary, always unstable, always carrying with it the shadow of its own end. Desire makes you move, but it also makes you restless. You climb the hill and immediately find another. But the moment you step out of that pattern, even briefly, the world becomes still. You see it differently, not as something to conquer, but as something to witness, to receive. This is what Schopenhauer admired in certain forms of Eastern thought: the turning inward, the stilling of the will, a kind of voluntary poverty of the soul. Not the poverty of lack, but the richness of enough. Because when you no longer need the world to satisfy you, you are free from its grip. And when the will quiets, even for a heartbeat, you begin to see clearly. The air becomes sweeter. The smallest gesture becomes profound. A simple glance, a single note of music, a moment of silence. All of it becomes sacred. This is not the happiness of celebration, but the peace of surrender. Not the thrill of victory, but the weightlessness of no longer needing to win. Modern life teaches us to feed the will endlessly, to set goals, to hustle, to grow, to maximize. But Schopenhauer dared to ask, what if the wisest path is not expansion but contraction, not addition but subtraction. What if the deepest relief is found not in more, but in less? To stop wanting is not to become numb, it is to become awake, present, still. Because in that stillness, you no longer confuse movement with life. You no longer chase echoes of joy. You simply are, and that, finally, is enough. There are moments in life that don't belong to time. Moments where the will stops whispering. Moments where we are not chasing, not craving, only seeing, feeling, being. Schopenhauer believed these rare moments were the closest thing we have to freedom. Not freedom of action, but freedom from the will. And where do these moments come from? From art, from music, from the quiet rapture of pure contemplation. To Schopenhauer, art was not decoration, it was liberation. Because when we are immersed in art, when we lose ourselves in a melody, in the curve of a sculpture, in the color of a painting, we are no longer seeking something for ourselves. We're no longer thinking, what do I gain? We simply witness. And in that witnessing, the will disappears. It's not that it dies, it pauses. It is suspended, and in that suspension, we taste something that can't be bought or earned. A moment where we are not the subject of need, but simply the eye of awareness. That's why music in particular held a special place in Schopenhauer's thought. Unlike other arts, music doesn't imitate the world. It flows from a deeper realm. It is the will speaking, but in a language that transcends the intellect. And when we listen, truly listen, we are no longer thinking, we are no longer wanting. We are simply inside the sound, timeless, desireless, still, but not numb, alive in a different way. He also saw this in philosophy, not the academic kind, but the kind born in solitude, in silence, in deep meditation, a thinking that wasn't trying to win or convince, but to see, to observe without clinging, to understand without craving. In these rare states, the veil lifts. We see the world not as a field of competition, but as a vast, trembling miracle. And for a moment, we are not the sufferer, not the seeker, not the wanting one. We are just here. And this, to Schopenhauer, was the only real kind of transcendence. Not religious ecstasy, not eternal happiness, but the quiet escape from the tyranny of desire, a moment of clear seeing, of disinterested joy, of freedom without cost. And though these moments fade, they leave an imprint, a memory of another way of being. And that memory can carry us through the noise, through the chaos, through the endless pull of the will. Because once you've stepped outside the storm, even for a breath, you know it's possible. And sometimes knowing that is enough. In a world where most seek power, comfort, or pleasure, Schopenhauer pointed to something different, something quieter, something harder. Compassion. Not as virtue signaling, not as moral obligation, but as a consequence of clarity. When you see life for what it is, a current of restless striving, a chain of suffering that binds all beings, you no longer see yourself as separate. You see pain everywhere. Not in a tragic, theatrical way, but as a simple, humbling truth. You suffer, they suffer, everything that lives suffers. And from that shared truth, compassion arises, not because you were told to love others, but because you see yourself in them. For Schopenhauer, compassion wasn't a social contract. It wasn't sentiment. It wasn't even a choice. It was what happens when illusion falls away. When you stop believing that your pain is special. When you stop pretending that others are just in your way. When you stop measuring people by how useful or agreeable they are. You begin to feel their existence, their fear, their longing, their vulnerability. And this sensitivity, though painful, is the beginning of wisdom. Not the cold wisdom of logic, but the deep wisdom of shared being. Schopenhauer believed that, despite all his pessimism, compassion was the highest human quality, because it was rooted in reality, not in fantasy, not in idealism, not in hope, but in the felt experience of suffering itself. To understand suffering is to stop glorifying dominance, to stop romanticizing winning, to stop believing that happiness is something you can hoard while others starve physically or emotionally. It is to know there is no victory while others weep. There is no peace built on someone else's pain. There is no true joy that isn't shared. But here's the paradox. Schopenhauer also knew that life would never become utopia. He didn't believe in heaven. He didn't think suffering would ever disappear. And still, he chose compassion. Because even if you can't end suffering, you can choose not to deepen it. Even if you can't save the world, you can touch it gently. Even if you can't be happy, you can help someone feel less alone. That is the kind of quiet goodness Schopenhauer believed in. Not grand gestures, but small recognitions. One soul seeing another and choosing not to turn away. That is compassion without illusion. Not based on reward, not based on control, just the raw truth of shared existence. And in a world of constant striving, maybe that is the most radical act of all. We're told that freedom means choice, that the more options we have, the freer we become. More money, more time, more control, and one day we'll finally feel it. Liberated, unlimited, free. But Schopenhauer disagreed, because most people don't want freedom, they want permission to follow their desires without resistance. And desire is not freedom. Desire is dependence. It binds you. It controls you. It promises something beautiful, then keeps you running in circles. To Schopenhauer, true freedom begins not in gaining more but in wanting less. Not in expanding your power, but in understanding its limits. This is a different kind of freedom. A freedom not of the world, but from the will. From the constant push and pull inside you. From the idea that peace is always somewhere else. From the lie that joy is just one more. He pressed achievement away. He saw that we are not free when we get what we want. We are free when we are no longer driven by what we want. This doesn't mean apathy. It means clarity. You can still love, you can still create, you can still move through life, but not as a servant of desire. Not as a slave to outcome, not as someone always asking the world to make you whole. This is the freedom of the quiet monk, the artist who creates without hunger for fame, the walker with no destination, the thinker who no longer argues, the human who no longer begs life to be different. It is not flashy, it is not marketable, but it is real. This freedom is not found in the world of noise. It lives in silence, in stillness, in the empty space between desire and fulfillment where nothing is missing and nothing is owed. Most people fear this space. They rush to fill it, but Schopenhauer invites us to stay, to linger, to explore what it means to stop running. Because the moment you realize you don't have to chase happiness, you begin to notice something deeper. A calm, a presence, a lightness. Not the thrill of getting what you want, but the deep relief of no longer needing to get it. And that perhaps is the only freedom worth having. Not freedom to chase endlessly, but freedom to rest. to be still, to be enough, even as the world keeps spinning. What happens when you stop chasing happiness? Not in a dramatic, self-denying way, not in bitterness, but in quiet acceptance, the kind that comes after seeing clearly. Most people are afraid of this question. They think without the pursuit of happiness, life becomes empty, but Schopenhauer saw the opposite. When you stop obsessing over happiness, life doesn't become less, it becomes real. You stop turning every experience into a transaction. You stop asking every moment to deliver something. You stop judging your life by whether it feels good, and start asking if it feels true. There is a different way to live, not through desire, but through observation, not through excitement, but through depth. You begin to notice small things, the shape of a shadow, the sound of wind, the stillness inside your breath, and you realize so much of life was already here. You just couldn't see it while you were running. This doesn't mean you never desire. It means you don't confuse desire with destiny. You don't confuse pleasure with meaning. You don't confuse happiness with truth. You learn to sit with boredom without panic. You learn to feel pain without assuming it's a failure. You learn to walk slowly without guilt, and you begin to trust the quiet voice inside that says, "You don't need more, you need less." To live without chasing happiness is not to reject joy. It is to stop depending on it, to let it come when it comes, and let it go when it goes. You find beauty, not because you demanded it, but because you made space for it. You find peace, not by earning it, but by unlearning the war. And maybe, just maybe, this is what maturity looks like. Not an escape from suffering, but a transformation of your relationship to it. Not a perfect life, but a clear one. Schopenhauer did not offer false hope, but he offered something better: freedom from illusion, freedom from the myth of endless bliss, freedom from the exhausting performance of constant positivity. And in that space, in that raw, unpolished, honest silence, you begin to live. Not for happiness, but for presence, for compassion, for truth. And maybe that's enough.